I want to pause here for just a second and talk just a smidge about this piece right here in terms of planning. I envision planning to also be choosing repertoire. And one of the sessions that I gave to one of the classes on Thursday was all about repertoire selection and significant composers and pieces. And I think Professor Seifert's going to make that handout available to everybody, but just broad strokes, a thumbnail sketch of that. This has been a passion of mine as far as published lists of repertoire and things like that, and I have a couple of research articles that are published about this subject. And the study that I spoke about with the class essentially was I took a large number of published repertoire lists and put them all together to see what trends emerged. And the most interesting finding of that, at least from my point of view, is that one, we do have core repertoire, and we can figure that out. But when we look at it in using from a statistical standpoint, from all the thousands and thousands of pieces that we have available to us, and in this particular study, there were almost 7,000 unique pieces that were a part of this particular study. Only, from the first time I did the test, only 45 were statistically significant out of thousands and thousands of pieces. And of those 45, none of them were grade 1, and only 1 or 2 of them were grade 2 and 3. So when I looked at it from grade level standpoint, that list expanded to 126. And you're welcome to use that handout as whatever means you see fit. But I will say this, we as a profession seem to have a very difficult time determining what high quality music is at the grade 1, 2, and 3 level. We don't have that much difficulty with grades 4, 5, and 6 for whatever reason. But in grade level 1 is the worst of all. And I say worst in the sense of we seemingly as a profession don't have any sort of common language by which to evaluate grade 1 pieces by which we can say this is music of high artistic merit at the grade 1 level versus some other grade level. That was one of the most interesting findings from that study. I also, as a quick caveat to that, if you don't, whatever your feelings might be about the teaching music through performance and band series, there's like a whole cadre of those volumes now. But if you only pick one volume to get, I would strongly encourage you to get the one that's teaching music through performance in beginning band. Because that particular volume, and see, you probably have that one.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about grade 1 music. And it's the best singular resource that I know. Would you agree with that as far as from a beginning band standpoint?
Yes, that's pretty good. And also, since I teach in Texas, so we've got the list of grade 1, grade 2 for contests. That's got some pretty good stuff on it too for a jumping off point of things that Texas uses for contests.
Absolutely. So that's sort of a quick Professor Seifert asked me to just touch on that just a little bit. But that handout is, you can make that available, and you're welcome to use that as you see fit. But repertoire selection goes right in here in terms of the planning piece of how we're going to conduct and rehearse our ensemble. So remember the intersection of these 3 circles, my point of view, that's where the conducting happens. So the second circle, all about rehearsal techniques, planning, and pedagogy. Some things that we do with an ensemble are quick fixes. For example, F sharp, F natural. Quick fix. We can see that immediately as, and hear it, hopefully, as a problem, and that's a quick fix. Dynamic content. That's another quick fix. Whenever I observe student teachers, I can usually tell pretty quickly kind of where they are in terms of their comfort level, because they'll go for the low-hanging fruit. And for those of you that are experienced teachers that have had student teachers in your ensembles, you're shaking your heads, you're like, yeah, that's kind of what we've experienced as well. They fix dynamic content, they fix wrong notes, hopefully wrong rhythms, and it takes them a bit to step into some other things that are perhaps a little bit more challenging, which are the opposite. Things that are longitudinal, things that take time, things that might not be quick fixes, that over the course of time, that hopefully we'll make some progress on. Think about it in the privacy of your own thoughts for a moment. What might be something that is a longitudinal problem or area that you have to spend time on again and again and again and over course of a series of weeks, months, years.
Air support.
Air support, absolutely. Okay, because that's not something that you can just do one time and then they've got it. That's constant reinforcement.
Honestly, the overall, achieving a very mature sonorous tone with an ensemble.
Okay?
Overall.
And not just ensemble, but individual too. Individual tones, ensemble tones. You think about for a moment how you sounded when you were in beginning band, whatever your instrument may be. Think about that aural delight that your parents had to, listen to, okay? I know because I have young kids now, well, they're not so young anymore, and I have two kids. I have a junior in high school who's a euphonium player, and a 7th grader. She just started band this year. She just transitioned from trumpet to horn. She's going to play horn. And so I can tell you, there are sounds that only a parent can love. But nevertheless, you think about how you sounded as a student at that level versus how you sound now. And I think we would obviously agree that we sound a lot better, and that's taken a lot of time and practice and instruction, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a longitudinal fix. So not just ensemble, but also individual. Okay? Another longitudinal issue. Intonation, specifically of how.
I would say, only like embouchure, the embouchure can affect, your ladder sharp.
Okay. No question. The embouchure development and breast support and everything else that goes with making a good tone such that we can hopefully affect intonation. Anything else?
But with intonation, having the students be aware of how their versatile playing fits within the ensemble to correct the intonation.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all, especially at like my level, they're not always aware of that. So you have to make them become paranoid and hate that feeling and then hopefully fix it.
And that takes weeks, months.
Forever.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it takes, yeah.
You know, I particularly with honor bands that I conduct, but even with my own group at A-State, I'll frequently say, this idea of we play a concert F or A or B flat or whatever, and everybody's like, oh, we're in tune now. We can stop listening, we're in tune. I always say to them, the tuning process begins when the horn comes out of the case. And it ends when the horn goes back in the case. Okay? It does not stop. It is in perpetuity. So, which is a nice segue to the two things I want to speak today about are ensemble pulse and intonation, because neither of these are quick fixes. These are things that take some time and patience. And if something doesn't work right the first time, try something else again. So, in terms of ensemble pulse, let's start there. Within the large ensemble, this is one spot where we have an us versus them. We have the conductor, whomever's up in front, and the ensemble in front of us. From my perspective, and I think many others, these are how I would apportion the pulse responsibilities within the ensemble. Read this first one about our role as the conductor. It's a lot of things. We have to figure out what it was or what it is, how fast, starting it, stopping it, monitoring it, and when necessary, altering it. Retardandos, accelerandos, etc. That's our responsibility. We have to take that responsibility. On the other hand, it's the ensemble's responsibility to maintain the pulse. And younger ensembles are going to have a more difficult time with this than more experienced ensembles. But even younger ensembles can be taught to have more responsibility for the pulse. So how can we do this? Well, here's some strategies that I'd like to encourage as far as ways that you might be able to deal with this. First of all, the first one, as it says here, is palms up, palms down. I'll let you read through the instructions here, and then we'll actually go through this and try this. Doesn't matter what meter, 4/4, 6/8, 2/4, doesn't matter. They're going to count out loud the pulses of that meter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., or whatever the meter may be. And while you're doing that, while they're counting, your palm is going to be up facing the ceiling. And I've seen people that do this, it doesn't matter, but you got to be high enough so people can see, but your palms are just facing up towards the ceiling. And people will count the specified meter that you offer. And then the second step, when you take this and you take your palms and do this, people are still counting, but it's silent. And internally, people are hopefully counting. And then turn the palms back over, and they're like, hopefully they're all with you, and on the whatever count that you suggest. And you can pretty quickly determine whether or not they have internal pulse through that simple exercise. So, not to put any pressure on this very esteemed audience, but let's try this particular exercise. Here we go. We'll keep it simple. We'll start in 4-4. And here's the pulse. Count with me. Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. 1.
Okay, congratulations. You passed. Now, notice I kept it pretty simple as far as the meter and the tempo. And I haven't done a Star Wars quote yet this morning, but now is the time. One of my favorite Star Wars movies is Episode 5. It's probably my favorite, which is the best of the Star Wars movies. And my favorite character, of course, is the Emperor and Darth Vader together. I don't know if that speaks about my own character, but regardless, there's a spot in there where Darth Vader very, very sternly says to Lando Calrissian, "I am altering the deal. Pray I do not alter it any further." So I am altering the deal now. Now we're going to conduct, or I'm going to give you as the meter, 5. And the tempo is now going to be this. Here we are, let's count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 1. 1. 1, 2.
Exactly. Good. Now, let's do one more. 2. Believe it or not, when you do this exercise and the number gets smaller, it actually, at least the times I've done this exercise in various ensembles, it actually gets more difficult. Okay, so 2 this time, and now the tempo will be this. Yes, Armenian dances tempo. Here we go. Here's the pulse. 1, 2, ready?
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 2, 1. 1, 1. 1, 2.
Now, we're having obviously a little fun with that. The point is this. You can do that simple little exercise lots of different ways, lots of different meters, lots of different pulses, and you can actually have students come up and do that same thing. I mean, you could have sections. I mean, there's any number of ways that you can deal with that simple little exercise to encourage development of independence of pulse and not you providing it all the time. Okay? So that's one technique. Here's another technique. Students in the ENMU Wind Symphony know this one to be true because I did this with them on Thursday. So the steps here, start the ensemble, step off the podium. At first, it will be panic-inducing. There will be like, "You're not going to conduct us." That's something I do frequently with honor bands. I force them to have the responsibility for pulse. But they will quickly, as it says here, quickly close ranks and decide where things should be. And then, what will also happen, we say this as conductors and music educators all the time. We say things like, listen. But we don't always say listen to what? We don't always say listen to whom. But you'll notice in this particular exercise, when you do this, that the listening, it's like the Grinch Who Stole Christmas when they have the little frame and the heart is like this big, and the Grinch, 3 times, right? That's what happens to the ears, is people really just start to expand out and just become, we're speaking about awareness. Aural awareness really starts to increase with this type of activity. And then you'll realize they really don't need you at all in terms of the pulse. One of the things that Professor Seifer did when he was conducting the symphonic band yesterday with the Sousa March, the Mother Goose March, which I'm excited to hear a full performance of that. I can't recall if I've ever heard a full performance of that piece. But when he was conducting that ensemble, there were many, many times he didn't give any pulse at all. He just gave some inspired gestures or cues and things like that. He was not drilling them on pulse, which, for those of you that are programming marches, I challenge you to try to do that. This gets into the third circle a little bit. But you'll see that you probably don't have to do as much pulse as you think. Now, disclaimer, younger ensemble, you probably do need to give them a little bit more. But maybe not as much as you think. I challenge you to find out where that threshold is as far as how much do I have to give them versus how little can I give them and still give the desired result. So, everybody find an octave that's comfortable for you. Here's your starting pitch. We're going to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and we're going to find very quickly what happens here. Okay?
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece were white as snow. Cool.
Now, did you also notice what happened? That we as ensemble members and even human beings to a certain extent, there's some emerging research that talks about, circadian rhythms and just natural biorhythms, things like that. In general, and this is, I'll make a marching band transfer here. Marching bands in general are very comfortable from 90 beats to a minute till about 130 beats a minute. Within that range, they're very comfortable. You go outside of those ranges, things become more uncomfortable. Did you notice how we more or less defaulted to that range? So, same thing. Except now I'm going to increase the speed quite a bit.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb.
Good. Did you hear about the third measure or so we locked in? Good. Let's do the opposite now. Here we go.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb.
Awesome. If I had a spectrometer where I could see inside of your brains the neurons firing right now on Mary Had a Little Lamb at that slow tempo or like an extraordinary amount for a Saturday morning. And I say that by way of saying we don't always need to provide the ensemble pulse. I didn't, and admittedly, to be fair, this is obviously a very advanced group. And so if you're dealing with junior high folks, beginners, the first time or two, there might be some challenges or difficulties, but I think you'll find that over the course of time, remember this is a longitudinal strategy here, over the course of time, I think they will be very receptive to this idea of taking more ownership, not complete ownership perhaps, but more ownership for the ensemble pulse. And those are just two little simple exercises that can help with that. Here's some other things to consider. What do I mean by active musicianship? Any takers? Yeah.
Kind of actually verbally say the rests for them, or actually give them a cue when to breathe.
Okay.
I know usually when there's a quarter rest, they're not thinking about, they think about the rest, but then they take too long to take a breath. So on that quarter rest, instead of me saying rest, I'll say breathe, and then,
Okay. The others agree? Split. Anybody else? Particularly one of the professional educators in the room.
I'd like them to show an external pulse, especially with less experienced players, like the foot pat or a head nod or rocking over shoulders. It helps.
Absolutely. You know, I think sometimes, and I say this with my own ensemble at A State, we have this sort of dichotomy, and I'll speak to that. We have this dichotomy sometimes, like, for example, and I'm not bashing marching band, but I'm using this as an example. We say all the time, when you're at attention, right? Heels and toes together, whatever foot, you know, don't move, right? Statues, you know, we don't want to see movement, anything like that. I might offer as a suggestion in a concert ensemble, that's a little bit antithetical, because if you see chamber musicians, orchestra musicians, people that are playing, they will move, just exactly what you said. You know, they'll move a little bit, whether that's through a head or a shoulder or a horn or whatever. I'm perfectly okay with musicians moving a little bit. Now, that said, I remember vividly when I was in high school, and I was in one of the years I was in the Missouri All-State Band, there was a clarinetist that was not too far away from me in the section, and this person was perfectly normal without the clarinet in their hands. There wasn't like any behaviors or tics or anything like that. But with the clarinet in their hands, and I'm not making this up, and I'm going to try to do this so I don't have to go to the chiropractor later, but this is what we would frequently see. Now that might be a bit much in terms of movement and a kinesthetic response, but I certainly have no problem with if it helps students to have more independence musically, to move together, breathe together, play together. Fine, I have no problem with that. They don't have to be Easter Island statues. They can move around a little bit. That's perfectly okay. Yeah.
Sometimes if my kids have, like for instance, in one of my pieces we're doing right now, they have like whole notes tied to a quarter note across the bar line, and the other members of the group don't have that. And so I've had them like write